Bikepacking has got to be up there with my two favourite ways of getting out on an adventure. Number one is fast packing, where you're using nothing but your legs and going across the mountains for as long as you want. The other is bike packing, and this holds a particular affinity in my heart, which I'm going to talk about through this guide of how to bike pack. Let's go through some kit. Do we really need this much stuff? And what are my essentials? First up, let's talk a few essentials. Number one is obviously a bike. Trying to go bike packing without a bike is not going to work very well. Now, when it comes to bike packing, ruggedness is your friend in my humble opinion. Now, I've seen lots of people and amazing folks on the internet who have gone off bike packing on their extremely expensive carbon bikes. However, as much as I do have a carbon bike for going fast and getting out there on my gravel adventures, will always come back to my little steel stallion here, the Genesis Vagabond. This thing is an absolute battle tank, and there's a few considerations that I just wanted to throw out there into the world about choosing your bike for bike packing adventures. Now, what's the difference first and foremost between bike packing and cycle touring? Now, I'm about to say that bike packing carries less kit, and I know I've got a lot of kit set up on here because, quite frankly, I've got a lot of kit that I want to cover in this particular video, so I've definitely overpacked for my little Tuesday jaunt into the field here. However, the difference with cycle touring is you're usually going to have panniers on the back and maybe even on the front. You're taking lots more equipment, and quite frankly, these are the people who are going around the world. They're doing big trips, maybe traveling a little heavier, maybe traveling a little bit more luxurious potentially, and not quite as light and fast, let's say, as bike packing. Now, the reason that bike packing has a real draw for me is it's a bit like alpine climbing. It's a bit like light and fast being the two sort of main key principles, I guess, in my understanding of bike packing at least. Now, it doesn't need to always be as fast as you can, but going as light as possible and as light as you can afford, as we'll talk about in this video, is a really great place to start. However, the benefits of having this bike in particular, a decent steel bike, is it is hard as nails. It's just like the Land Rover Defender of bikes, this bike. I love it to pieces. I am so emotionally attached to this bike. We have been through so much. When I bought this to go and bike pack all the way around Iceland for 3,500 kilometers, 28 days, a full expedition, A, I carried less kit than you can see here, and B, I had this bike because I knew that if it went wrong in any way, shape or form, the likelihood of being able to repair it with a pair of pliers, a blowtorch and a hammer was highly likely. The disadvantage of anything outside of sort of titanium or steel is if a carbon bike falls over and you crack the side of that carbon, that bike is pretty much useless and very, very difficult to be able to fix out there in the wild. Now, when I was in Iceland, I wanted to make sure that I could have this fixed anywhere, at any petrol station or mechanic's garage. I could get some sort of repair done. And we're going to talk about different tools and bits and pieces to carry with you, but bike choice is absolutely key. I've gone for drop bars on this. I've got the Vagabond, which is a bit more of a mountain bike geometry in the frame, so it gives me a little bit more space here. The top tube, for example, is not quite perfectly horizontal, gives me a lot more aggression on the bike as well. Nice, big, meaty 2.1 tires on the wheels, which means I've got plenty of grip and I've got plenty of a little bit more cushioning, and it's a little bit easier to be able to go a little bit more off-road. I say a little bit more off-road. There aren't many mountain bike tracks that I wouldn't take this bike on. It's an absolute tank. And that is number one, really, when it comes to getting into bike packing. You don't need to spend thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on really, really expensive bikes. This frame set itself cost me around £1,600 back in 2018, and I was doing my Iceland trip on a little bit of a shoestring. I just left the army. I wanted to celebrate leaving the army, and I wanted to make this as cheap as possible, quite frankly, because it was going to be extortionately expensive to go to Iceland itself. So this, really, really good bike, and this has stood up to the test of time over the last nearly 8 years. In fact, over 8 years since I've had this, and it's just the most spectacular bike. A really good, solid choice for getting into bike packing. You can absolutely travel even lighter than what I've got set up on here. You can absolutely put it onto your carbon bike as well, but I have a real attachment to my steel stallion here, the Genesis Vagabond. After that, we're looking at bike packing. If we need bike packing, we need to put something into bags. We need to pack something. If we're looking at bike packing bags, There is an array of different bikepacking bags in the world, and you can spend an absolute fortune, frankly, on loads of weird and wonderful different things. My advice here, friends, is to start off with a bag that you can put on your handlebars, a bag that you can put onto your saddle, and a bag that will attach somewhere into your frame. And from there, adding bits in as you go, depending on how you see fit, but also what you prefer to hold. Now, a lot of your gear is going to go on the handlebars and on the saddle. The saddle bag itself, it's a very important choice because with some, they can flip around quite a lot. This one's got a bar integrated into the saddle, which I will show you in a second once I've got everything set up, to stop it from swaying around, which is really, really key. I did have something similar to this beforehand, a different brand. It didn't have that exo rail bar in it, and it was flopping everywhere like a dead goose, and it was horrendous when you're trying to crank away going up a hill and you've just got this bag flopping around everywhere. It was really difficult to be able to pack it properly and strap it down to the bike to eliminate that movement. Now we've adapted since 2017 when I bought all this stuff to new styles of bikepacking bags that have like a shell, like more of a hard shell that will attach to the base of your saddle. I know Alpkit, these are all Alpkit bags. Alpkit do a great one, Restrap do a great one. There's a bunch of different brands, and then that'll allow for a waterproof bag to just be removed from the back, which is an incredibly useful thing and probably going to be my next upgrade. But these bags are certainly serving me incredibly well. On the handlebars, having a big bag like this is a 20-litre dry bag that can slot in between the drops, or even on the, if you've got flat bars, it can just fit quite snug onto the handlebars. And that's where, for example, you see in here, it's my sleeping system and shelter system are all in there to keep it relatively light on the handlebars, but also the big bulky stuff is then out of the way. And then on the frame, there's a selection of different frame bags that we can use. When I actually went to Iceland, I didn't have any water bottles on the frame, but I had a custom made frame bag that filled this entire triangle, which was incredibly useful, but it did act as a sail for crosswinds. I've seen so many different people use full frame bags, and I absolutely do enjoy using it, but here's a point. The more space you have, this is exactly the same when it comes to anything backpacking and trail running and trying to go a bit more light and fast. The amount of space you've got is the amount of space you will fill. So if you give yourself loads and loads and loads of room, all these different bags, all this weird and wonderful stuff, you're going to fill that space. And you might fill that space with things that you just don't need. So going slightly smaller and then adding little bits as you go is, in my view, the best way of doing this to find out exactly what works for you. To give you a full overview of what I'm using here, yes, I've got the saddle bag, I've got the handlebar bag, I've got a frame bag, I've got this top tube bag as well, which is great for tools. I tend not to, the zip's quite fragile nowadays, it's quite old, but in here I just tend to put tools and things that I don't need to be getting in and out of all the time, because A, I want to save my zip for as long as possible, and B, I want to keep my tools out of the way. You can absolutely overpack on tools, which is a lesson I'll come on to in a bit. I've got a strap here for a spare tube. There's another one in here, but I've got another one on the frame to keep it out of the way. Water bottle holders for small water bottles. These canister pockets here, which go onto the handlebars, which are incredibly useful for snacks and things to put away in. And there's another water bottle in the top here as well, so there's one on each side. The handlebar bag with a little bit of a wallet on the front, which is great for phone or just wallet or anything that's particularly precious. And then I've got the frame bag where I tend to put things like waterproofs, my charging bank in the other side, passport, all that sort of thing. And one thing that has been a recent addition for me, with the rise of gravel and gravel cycling, we have come into the realm of gravel packs. And this is an incredibly useful thing to have on your back. Now, in some circles, the goal of bikepacking is to pack everything onto the bike. And I firmly agree with that, I do. But one thing that I found incredibly useful is having a bag like this to have a hydration bladder in and to put your food for the day in. Now, when I went to Iceland, that was 28 days. I resupplied food at every single shop I could find, basically resupplied it every single day, much to the dismay of my credit card. And then just put that food into my pack, onto my back. Because that meant that my system on the bike was then as perfect as I wanted it to be. Everything had its home, everything was set up, and I didn't need to touch it, out with charging banks and stuff like that. I didn't need to touch it until I got to my campsite to set up, which meant my admin was a lot easier. So having just a little something on your back, or even a hip pad that you can put your daily food in, is something that I find incredibly useful. Of course, if you're only going for an overnight, then your front pack with your stove, you've got your rehydrated meal or whatever it is that you're going to eat for that night can all be packed away. But I did find having a backpack something incredibly useful. You can even use, don't need to get a gravel pack, you can even use a mountain biking hip pack, you can use trail running vests, and equally I've got the Osprey Raptor, which is a 14-litre mountain bike pack, which is incredibly useful for those much bigger trips and expeditions that I do on a not so regular basis, albeit I could just love more time to do bikepacking. Wouldn't we all love more time to do bikepacking? But for those bigger trips, just having something slightly bigger on the back. But again, remember, like I said before, the more space you have, the more space you will fill. So being mindful of your system and just building a system that really works for you is super important. But carrying your food and your water on your back, and that's pretty much about it, is a really good place to start, because it just means you've got that flexibility of your system here on the bike. So let's get the camera rolling. Let's get our bike packing kit fully set up. Let's fully set up tent and camp here in this field. And let me talk you through all the bits and pieces that you can use on your next bike packing adventure. Okay, so here we have a variety of different setups that you can use for your sleeping and shelter system. So we've talked through the bike, we've talked through the bike packing system. Next, the two most important things: where to sleep, something to sleep in, something to sleep under. And we're going to talk about the three different systems that I've got here individually. So we'll start off with the most obvious, the Humble tent. Now this is a bit more of a premium lightweight tent. This is the Terra Nova Laser Compact 2. One of my favorite all-time tents. They have been upgraded over time, and of course newer models will come out, but this has served me really, really well for a number of years. It has been pretty well battered, and it's still in really, really good shape. The benefit of going for a tent like this is the poles, once folded, are less than a foot long, and the entire tent, once it's all packed in, is less than 1.2 kilos, which when it comes to going lighter, when it comes to going faster, when it comes to going further, weight is everything. And having something like this, something lightweight, can really, really help. We can go even more lightweight, but the benefit of having a tent means you've got some admin space. You're completely protected from the elements. You've got some space to be able to live. If the weather absolutely decides to turn on you, you've got shelter, we've got a porch, we've got an inner, we've got some space to be able to spread out, service our kit, sort our lives out, and shelter down from the elements. Now then, on the other hand, for the more hardened of us, when we want going out for our bikepacking adventure, we have the bivy bag. The bivy bag is quite frankly a waterproof bag that goes over your sleeping bag. Now, I used to be in the army. I've spent many a night in a bivy bag under the stars at night, and it is a fantastic way of traveling extremely light and relatively fast. And this is something that I'll use on my fast packing setup, not just on the bike. Quite frankly, if I'm honest, I will only use a bivy bag if I know I'm only going out for a couple of nights, if I'm doing a long distance ultra event or a race, or if I know the weather isn't going to bum out on me. Because let me tell you, when you are in a bivy bag and there's no protection from the sky, and then the weather closes in, that will test your resilience, my friends. But the benefit of having a bivy bag, they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You can get much lighter versions, you can get a lot more expensive versions, you can get cheaper versions than this one as well, but they will serve you really, really well. Inside, sleeping bag is already in. We'll talk about sleeping system in a second. The benefit of a bivy bag is you can even put your roll mats and stuff inside it as well, to make for one very, very lightweight sleeping system where your sleeping and your shelter system is all in one place. On the other hand, if you wanted a little bit of protection from the elements and you still wanted to use the lightweight facility of a bivy bag, having a lightweight tarp like this is a fantastic addition to make a makeshift shelter, actually using your bike as part of the shelter. Now, there's a few benefits to this. Personally, I quite like using this because A, it incorporates the bike, which means I know the bike is getting at least some protection. There's a little bit of security there as well. But equally, it gives you a nice bit of breathing space and living space underneath. It is not perfect against all the conditions. If you've got horizontal rain, it's quite difficult to be able to erect the tarp in the right way for the weather, judging that the weather is going to be as predictable as we want it to be, but it does give you a bit of living space underneath, which is a fantastic little place to be. It means that you are very, very lightweight. It takes up next to no space at all in your bikepacking kit. So if you are going lighter, if you are going faster, if you are going further, and you're up for roughing it just a little bit more, then having this set up with a bivy bag and the sleeping system that I'll show you in a second is a really, really great place to save a lot of space, quite a bit of time, and get you a little bit more sort of closer to that raw version of wild camping, bikepacking, and true spirit of adventure. Okay, so let's talk sleeping system. We've already mentioned about the bivy bag. If you're in a tent, you're very seldom going to need a bivy bag. However, when it comes to the sleeping system itself, there are certain layers that we can add up for an effective, comfortable night's sleep. And I absolutely love camping. I love sleeping outside. I genuinely feel like I sleep better outdoors, in a tent, under a tarp, in a bivy bag than I do in a bed at home. However, there are layers that we can make to this. Now, when you're sleeping, you ideally want to be sleeping in as little clothing as possible so that the body heat is getting insulated by the sleeping bag, and then your clothes that you're wearing, they're not trapping any damp or any cold air in that sleeping bag, because a sleeping bag is an insulating thing. It will insulate whatever is put in it. If something is cold, it will insulate the cold. If something is warm, it'll insulate the warm. So if we can strip back as many layers as we can, the warmth from our body heat is then going to be insulated as effectively as possible. Now, if we are looking for a little bit more warmth in our sleeping bag, having something like this, which is upside down, this sleeping bag liner can be a really, really big help. Very, very lightweight, little silk bag, and it has a number of really good uses. It can add a good couple of degrees of warmth inside your sleeping bag, but it can also, if you're a bit smelly like me and you go and do big adventures like 28 days around Iceland, where you only take 2 sets of kit, you can be pretty smelly. These things can keep your sleeping bag just smelling a little fresher and a little bit more protected from just body gunk and gunge after long adventures getting into your sleeping bag, which is a little bit more difficult to clean and service. So, a sleeping bag liner, a very, very, very incredibly useful tool to have. Now, the sleeping bag itself, again, you can go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum in pricing, and some of the more high-end sleeping bags are extortionately priced. However, this is one that has served me incredibly well. This is an Alpkit Pipe Dream 400. I've got the extra long version because I'm 6'2", so I think this is 200 centimeters long, which is actually a pure luxury, because most sleeping bags will be 180 to 185 centimeters long. If you're 190 centimeters like me, it's really irritating because it just ends up being a little bit too tight once you're fully in. And going for the extra long version is something that's just so much worth just that extra few pennies to make sure you've got a comfortable night's sleep. This sleeping bag's wonderful. It's nice and light. It's got a decent temperature range, but again, when you're choosing your different type of sleeping bag, that's a story for another day. There's so much we can go into, but we want to go for comfort. We want to understand what the climate is like on the time that we want to be able to go for our bikepacking adventure. So we need to understand, generally speaking, what are we looking at? If it's the middle of the summer like it is now, then this will be perfect because it'll still get cold at night. If I'm going into early spring or late autumn where it's going to be a bit colder, this might not be enough. I might need to get my thicker sleeping bag, in which case I need to be considering how much I'm going to be packing onto the bike. And then you're looking at weight differences as well. So the sleeping bag is going for something that works for you, something that's tried and tested. Try it in your back garden, see how you feel with the temperatures. Try a sleeping bag liner, try different types of bag, and then once you've got that understanding and you know what you want to use, then you've got your kit for your bikepacking adventure. Now then, onto sleeping mats. I've got 2 different types of sleeping mat here. You don't need to carry both. This is an inflatable cloud base. Again, this is from Alpkit. I get Alpkit stuff because it's very cost effective, it's very well made, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. These inflatable roll mats are very, very comfortable to lay on, especially on the ground. I find lying on the ground pretty comfortable, but they're very, very comfortable to lay on. The disadvantage, of course, is if one of these pops. Now then, here's my argument. As part of your repair kit, zip ties and duct tape will solve world peace. So a patch of duct tape and wherever you can find your hole is highly likely going to fix it and make it serviceable for the rest of your trip. However, if it goes wrong and that doesn't get fixed, this is completely useless when it is deflated. So it's one of those things. You're going to roll the dice and you're going to risk it. I generally do most times. I will just take this. Or you can go for a foam mat like I've got here. This is more of a eggshell Thermarest waffle board. This has served me many a night in some alpine mountains. It's absolutely fantastic. I did actually take this specific one to Iceland with me as well as that one, just because I was a little bit conscious of the cold. I really didn't know how cold it was going to be, how cold it was going to feel. I got it completely wrong because it was actually really warm. But this is something that I know is never going to fail me. I know it's always going to be comfortable. I know it's always going to be a warm thing, and I know it's always going to be there. Obviously, the disadvantage to carrying that is finding somewhere to put that length and that size of a piece of kit. One thing I've seen some people do, which I haven't brought myself to doing for this because, quite frankly, I just don't really want to, is cutting it down so you can cut it down to a certain size. When I had this, I actually just mounted it on top of my handlebars on the bike, kind of as you saw at the start of this video. I had that mounted at the front, it was out the way, and it served a purpose and didn't get in the way of any gears or brakes or anything. So these are, again, really useful to get. The choice really is yours. Some of these inflatable roll mats, they can go onto the higher end of prices. They can also get relatively heavy. Equally, things like this, they can be bulky, so it depends on what kit you want to carry and where you want to carry it. But a bit of trial and error, having both of these in your adventure kit storeroom, if you can afford that, if your budget will stretch, is a very useful thing to have so that you can make your choice. You can trial and error in the back garden and on more local trips until you find the system that's going to work for you. Don't just copy my system. This is something that I know works for me. I know what works, I know what doesn't work for me and my taste. You might be completely different, and it's just about getting a bit of trial and error, investing in a few bits of kit, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and frankly, I've bought things that haven't worked before and then just sold them again on Facebook Marketplace or sent them back, or you find what works for you. So when it comes to sleeping system, absolute essential is a mat because you will get incredibly cold without it. Next up, a very good sleeping bag that you can know and trust. A sleeping bag liner is a useful addition and just something you can just have inside your sleeping bag at all times. They weigh literally nothing. And then if you are going a little bit more wild under a tarp or completely going underneath the stars, then having a bivy bag, again, really useful thing. The best thing about having a bivy bag is once your sleeping bag is inside it like this, once it's inside the bivy bag, you can then pack that sleeping bag up inside the bivy bag, which I've not done particularly neatly here, but I will do when you see me pack up later on. You can pack it all up, and that's going to keep your sleeping bag dry. When you put it into your dry bag, which I will do shortly, that's going to mean that your entire sleeping system is pretty much good to go. All you've got to do is throw your mat down on the floor, unpack your bivy bag, and there you go, your sleeping system is good to go. So you can erect camp in a matter of seconds. Very useful, very quick, very simple, but it is for a certain type of person, depending on what your taste is and just how luxurious you want to be. I'm always going to err on the side of getting a tent because I love staying in a tent. It's comfortable, it's nice, it's a little bit of shelter. I can sit and do videos and bits and pieces while I'm out on the hill. It just means I've got a nice space to live. Of course, I know I'm blessed to have a pretty decent premium tent, but there are some really good lighter weight options out there on the market that won't break the bank. Alpkit do some fantastic options, or even Wild Country, which is the Terra Nova kind of step down, all under the same umbrella, but they do some really good lighter weight versions that are not going to break the bank when it comes to budget. So you've got something to sleep under, you've got something to sleep in. We've talked about the bikepacking bags, we've talked about the bike. Let's talk about some of the essentials of kit that you need to be taking with you on your next adventure. But the most important thing really is something to cook with. Now, when it comes to something to cook with, this is my absolute go-to on stoves. I do have a jet boil at home, which I do really like. I really like the simplicity of a jet boil. However, I just feel it's a little bit more bulky than this setup, and it's a little bit more heavy than this setup as well. And this is a nice simple stove. I'm not going to screw in the gas because it's too much of a hot day today, so I'm not going to light anything. But you have a nice simple stove. The gas is separate, so it's nice and stable. And one very simple, very light titanium pan. And that is it. It does come with a windbreak if I need it, and that is my go-to cooking setup. I've used this for the last 8 years. Yes, 8 years. And it's not done me any wrong at all. I have had it replaced 8 years ago. I had one before. It got stolen. There we go. People in campsites can suck. And then I had it replaced immediately with the exact same one. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It does not have a sparker in order to light it, which is a good and a bad thing, because it means you need to carry a flint stick, which will never fail you, which is really good. But also I found, which has happened with my Jetboil, is the lighter part of the stove itself has failed. So if you haven't brought a flint stick or a lighter with you, because you haven't thought about it, because your stove's got a clicker, and that clicker doesn't work, then you're going hard routine with your rations and you're eating things cold. The benefit of this not having one is I have to bring that flint stick and that lighter, so I always remember it. Now, one good thing about this is a little gas stand with a Jetboil. You've got the gas, you've got the stove, and then you've got the pan that will go on top, which means it can be quite top heavy. I don't necessarily need this for this stove, it just so happens to be in the kit, but having this little gas stand means that the gas bottle can stand up straight and it is more stable. So when the stove is on top, when the pan's on top, it's less likely to topple over, makes it more stable. A very, very useful thing to have. So we've got something to cook with. All of our food, try and keep it in a dry bag, keep your rations in there. Just for the sake of this video, I've got an emergency ration, which is something I very rarely leave home without on my big adventures. This is actually a couple of years old now, is definitely still in date. If not, I'm going to eat it anyway, because it's only peanut butter. But it is something that I just have in the back of my pack, because if it all goes wrong, let's say the stove does fail, and I don't really want to just eat cold, horrible, wet smush, then I can get that downrange. And it's got 1,600 calories in one go. Worth the wait to have some emergency rations, friends. Everything else, keep your snacks and your food in a dry bag, keep it separate, keep it together. Next thing, charging. I carry a charging bank. I have tried to look at the depths of more lighter and more effective charging banks. This one is the BioLite one. It is a bit of a weight, but I know that it will hold a lot of charge for my cameras, my watch, and my phone when I'm out and about doing things for multiple days. So for me personally, it's worth the wait because I know that that's an effective bit of kit. Other side, we've got wash kit. Now, a lot of you are going to be thinking, well, do you wash? Well, I tend to just jump in the stream, actually. I jump into any body of water I can. I will also take quite a small version of a microfiber towel. We do bare all when we go wild camping because I don't see the point in carrying a big towel. I don't want to waste the space, and this does me a solid anyway. When I was in Iceland, I actually just used a t-shirt because it was the only thing that I had spare. Inside here, I've got a bar of soap in a bag, some poo bags, toothpaste, toothbrush, some lip balm, and a pack of tissues, and that's it. The pack of tissues are for when nature calls and you've got to go and dig your hole and go and do what you need to do in the ground. The poo bags are to take that tissue home. Don't be one of those people that just leaves it out, because it is the worst thing in the world. It just, A, it's the awful thing to see, and B, if you're an unfortunate person like me that goes litter picking in the mountains quite often, picking that horrible stuff up is rough. So don't do it. Don't be one of those people, and don't just put a rock on it thinking, oh, it'll be all right because it's got a rock on it and it'll biodegrade. It takes frickin' ages and it looks awful. So just be a better person. Take a pack of tissues, do your business, put it in a poo bag, wrap it up, tie it in a knot, chuck it in the bag. It's not going to smell because it's a poo bag, and it's waterproof, it's out the way. Take your own stuff away with you. Wash kit. Doesn't need to be all singing or dancing. Clearly, for the ladies who are watching this video, we have got sanitary products and other more logistical things that we need to work with. Now then, my advice here, there's a number of blogs out there, and I will link all of them as much as I possibly can, that are going to help you when it comes to dealing with things out there in nature. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not something to be ashamed of talking about. It's something to get right, because this is going to be the difference between your enjoyment of your adventure and something that's going to hold you back. Being prepared, having all of your sanitary products, having everything ready is an absolute key. But also, my advice here, if I may, as a man, my advice here is trial and error on more simple, closer to home adventures around those key times on your calendar. So if it is part of the menstrual cycle and you still want to be able to practice for these trips and these adventures, start with the back garden, start with a local field, start with somewhere where if things go wrong, if it gets uncomfortable, or if something's gone logistically wrong, you know that you can get home pretty quick and sort yourself out. It might even be worth packing too heavy for these smaller adventures as well, so you know you've got everything you could need and you're trialing and erroring everything that works and everything that doesn't work. Head torch is a solid. I tend to not bother with a head torch if I've got a bike light, so it kind of covers it for itself. Sometimes my head torch, I've got one of my helmet mounted bike lights, it all becomes the same thing. I like to take the luxury of another pair of shoes because I've kept them on for this video and I'm regretting it because the boas are sticking into my feet, but it's nice to just get sweaty, horrible feet off, get your shoes drying out, get the inner soles out, get your socks off and get your feet out there into the ground. And I'll wear those sandals if I know I'm going for a swim, if it's a rocky river or something like that. I need to be in the water, so I just love having those sandals, and I love the hipster vibe of getting them strapped to the outside of my saddlebag and they just stand up to the test of time. I've got a couple of spare pegs here for the various bits of shelter that I've got set up. Water bottles, the bladder that's in my pack that I had on my back. Now let's talk clothes, shall we? So, oh, in fact, I've missed this. Personal first aid kit. When it comes to personal first aid kit, you will know your bodies better than anyone else. So take what you feel like you need for your own personal case. I am unfortunately a little bit plagued by migraines, so I have the right stuff for that. And I also have an amount of first aid kit that I know that I will need and that I know that I'm proficient to use. There's no point going out there and buying a big mountain leader med pack if you don't know how to use half of it, because you're just wasting space, energy, resources, and weight on your bikepacking kit. So your own personal first aid kit, don't leave home without it. I like to get into the practice of just putting in a waterproof bag a £10 note in there as well, so I know I've always got a little bit of spare cash in that emergency in there, with a little medical ID card as well, with my contact details, my emergency contact, blood group, all those sort of things. That is a logistical video for another day, which I'll go into on a safety side of life, but your personal first aid kit is a must. Map and compass. So I like to make this little foam thing. This is a throwback to being in the army. I have a foam wallet that I put my compass in. My map is usually on my person or in my pack, so that I've got A, the proficiency of how to use these two things, and B, the kit itself. And keeping my compass safe, keeping it damage free is why this comes into practice, and that will just sit in my frame bag. Clothing, let's talk clothing. Something spare, something wet, something warm. Those are the rules. Now, when it comes to something spare, take it from me, you don't need that much. You really don't. When I went round Iceland, I used the same set of bib shorts, the same jersey, one pair of pants, one set of thermal leggings, and one t-shirt for an entire month. I smelled horrible, but it worked, because you don't need that much stuff. This is going back to my army days of wet and dry routine. The wet kit, the stuff that you're going to get grimy and dirty and horrible throughout the day, that is your day kit. Then, once you've got camp set up and you're ready to settle down, you're ready to have a brew, you're ready to eat some food, you put your dry kit on. Spikes morale, means you can dry out your other kit if you need to. You can wash it in a river if you need to, or wash it in the showers or whatever. You can get that stuff serviced. You've got something nice and comfortable to put on. You even sleep in it if you really want to. But having just one set of spare kit, in the sense of, here I've got a pair of shorts. Sometimes I'll just take a pair of thermal leggings because they're nice and comfortable, and one spare long sleeve top, which I know is an absolute belter of a top. Let me show you about this actually. This is my favourite layer of all. It's a Rab Borealis. No, I am not sponsored by Rab. I would love to be though, so Rab, if you're watching this, please sponsor a man. This is a Rab Borealis jacket. It's quite tight fitting, wind resistant, water resistant, and quite frankly, I've had this layer years. It's so good, I've bought 3. I absolutely love it. It's got a hood. It's a big hood as well. It comes right up to my chin so it can keep me nice and warm, and it is an absolute stellar go-to spare layer. Now, when it comes to jackets, waterproof jackets, you've got a choice. You can go for something a bit more like this ProFlex jacket here, which is a lot more of a softer touch. It's still waterproof, still got tape seams, and still works perfectly. Or you can go for something a little bit more like the good old-fashioned Gore-Tex. This is a Montane lightweight Gore-Tex jacket. Very, very good bit of kit. I know for an absolute fact is 100% waterproof. It's got a good aggressive hood on there that will go over my helmet as well, and something that I know will last the elements. Your choice of jacket here is very much down to what's the climate look like. Again, this sort of weather, I'll probably air for the lighter version, just because I'm going to sweat out like a pig in that if I put it on, and I just want something for a quick bit of protection from the rain, then going for the lighter version. If I am going into heavier weather, then I will also take waterproof trousers. This is something that I really genuinely wish that I took to Iceland with me, because I had a set of leg warmers and my bib shorts on, and then when it rained, I got very wet and very cold, and I wish I had these. So this is something, look at the climate. If you know you're going into changeable weather, if you know you're potentially going to hit the rain and it's going to be particularly heavy when it comes, taking waterproof trousers is incredibly useful. And then finally is your warm layer. This, again, I am all about, by the way, friends, when you get kit, buy something quality, because it's going to last. All of these things are years old. Years old. This I got from a Transglobe campfire event. This is a Berghaus thermal jacket. It's actually reversible, which I really like. This is a Berghaus jacket which I got in 2016 when I was doing a blender bike race against Pip Stewart. She won because she's far fitter than me, and I got the second place runners-up prize of this thermal jacket. I've had this since 2015. It's 10 years old and it's still going strong. My absolute go-to jacket. I have another jacket which I bought off eBay many years ago in 2014, which is a Mountain Equipment Bastion, and that has been through hell and water and everything in between. Me and this jacket have a long-standing relationship. It's covered in my blood, it's patched up, it's duct taped up, it's years old. It's a little heavier, it's a little bit more bulky, but if I know I'm going into cooler weather, that is my absolute go-to jacket. So when it comes to your spare kit, there's a lot of working around what you can use depending on what the weather's going to be. And that is one of your biggest sort of mitigating factors, really. Is it going to be relatively tame weather? Do we think the weather's going to be changeable? Do we think it's going to start raining? Is it forecast to get a bit colder? Are we going up high into the mountains? Because of course, if we're sleeping overnight and we're relatively high up, it's going to be colder. So we can start looking at, again, what works. Quite frankly, friends, a lot of this will come down to trial and error. What worked for you, what didn't work for you. One of the most important things you can do, I'm looking for my phone, but I'm recording on it, is on your phone, go onto your notes app and have an after action review, which is a separate video, an after action review on each and every single big adventure you go on. And the thing I want to mention of that is the kit. What did you take? What didn't you use? What did you wish you had? And what would you change for next time? When we're going through that, we're looking at that and being like, hey, do you know something? It was too cold for this jacket. I should have brought my other jacket, so that's something to consider. I didn't bring gloves. Maybe I should have brought thinner or thicker gloves. You know, I didn't have spare socks. Then these are all things that you can have in that list. Spare socks are an absolute must, because putting on fresh socks is just the best thing in the world, and it means you can cycle in between wet socks and dry socks and constantly rotate them through, so you've always got one set of dry socks at the end of the day. Spare pair of gloves and a spare hat, which is covered in grass. A spare hat. Having those is really your set of essentials when it comes to a bikepacking adventure. You find your bike, you find your noble steed, you have the bike packing bags that you know are going to work for you. Again, we're working through potentially a saddle bag, a handlebar bag, and some form of frame bag. Use a backpack if you really want to use a backpack, but again, trial and error and avoid putting too much weight in it. The amount of space you have is the amount of space you will fill, so just remember that. Then we want to figure out what we're sleeping under, whether we're taking a tent, a bivy bag, or a shelter, something to sleep in, so our sleeping bag liner, and our roll mat, all of our spare bits of equipment, our stove and something to cook, food to cook, spares, first aid kit, torch, wash kit, charging, compass, spare pair of shoes if you want to, and then we've got a few sort of bike spares which I haven't unpacked from the bike, but basically the tools that you know you will use, you know how to use, things like spare tubes, if you're running tubeless, a tubeless repair kit, a multi-tool with a chain splitter, a spare quick link for your chain as well, some tire levers are all Billy basics to be taking with you. I would always advocate for having some duct tape around the bottom of a water bottle, so you've always got duct tape handy, and a few zip ties in your repair kit as well, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to be able to fix it with duct tape, zip ties, and a bodge together of whatever tools that you've got. You will learn as you go through doing these any different spares and bits and pieces that you might need as your competence grows on how to use those tools as well. Exactly the same with having like a map and a compass. It's useless if you don't know how to use it, so there's no point weighing yourself down, which is what I did the first time I went to Iceland. There's no point weighing yourself down with too many things that you don't know how to do as you're preparing for every single eventuality. Eventually you're going to come to something that you're not going to be able to know how to fix, and then that is where we come into actions on when it comes to the unknown and dealing with that, but that's a story for another day. But until then, friends, I'm going to pan this camera out, you're going to see me pack up camp, and then we're going to get back on the road.